At first, I wanted to cover the lore of all the Shuriman cards in one big video. Well, that was before I realized that that video would be way over 30 minutes long. So instead I decided to separate the video into two parts. So today we will have a look at all the cards related to Azir, which even includes the hidden deck of cards which you can get if you level Azir up to his 3rd form. And then later on I wanna have a look at Renekton and Nasus and all the Bakai. These two kinds of cards really give us a lot of new lore. And especially when it comes to Azir, we learned about some really interesting new details. So without further ado, let's have a look at what is happening with Azir. You see, although the concept of Azir was always really cool, there were some holes in his story. After his death, being resurrected by the blood of his bloodline makes sense. Shuriman has its fair share of history with blood magic. Getting ascended just as he was resurrected would also make sense. It is the light of the sun disk that ascends people. And we know, just as he was resurrected, the light of the fallen sun disk reflected onto him. But then, with his resurrection, the entire empire was raised from the sands, and that part was never explained. We never learned about why the sun disk was raised from the sands or how it happened. It simply just did. So I am super happy to see that Azir's cards actually explain it. Now we know why the Empire was risen from the sands after Azir's resurrection. So let's get into it. Let's start with Azir's own description. When Azir took up the mantle as Emperor of Shuriman, he was arrogant, blind. He accumulated power and planned his ascension so that he might stand as ruler over not just Shuriman, but the entire world. A quote from the history of the Ascended Host. Here you can see that Azir is using some kind of a celestial sandy magic. Which, you know, makes sense. He is the guy who can apparently resurrect mirror images of his own soldiers from sand. In fact, according to Azir's story, the sand soldiers which he summons are actually images of the soldiers that died in the past. He can essentially create an image of his fallen people. Anyway, we will get to the details of that in just a second. What's interesting about this image is that using his sandy magic, it almost seems like Azir is viewing some kind of a calendar. From his point of view, at the top you can see an indicator of the sun disk. And around it, I assume you can see the position of the sun. And on the sides you can see the cycle of the moon. I wonder if this Shuriman calendar is revealing when the next ascension would be possible. Maybe you can't ascend people whenever you want. Maybe you have to wait for the right lunar cycle. It would make sense since the sun disk is reflecting the power of the sun. So without the sun being in the right position, it makes sense why the ascension wouldn't be possible. Last thing to point out here, yes, Azir has pants. I'm sorry to those of you who enjoyed his naked legs. Then there is the leveled up form. Short of fulfilling his destiny, Azir's lifelong friend and a newly named brother hatefully cast him off the dais. In that hateful moment, Shuriman was cursed, doomed to ruin for thousands of years to follow. Of course, this quote of the history of the Ascended Host is talking about Xerath, Azir's advisor who technically betrayed him because of misunderstanding. If you are interested in what happened between Xerath and Azir, we recently talked about it in Nasus' story. Regardless, here Azir is using his sandy magic to reconstruct portions of his empire. This is already hinting at how the entire empire was resurrected, but once again we will get to that in just a second. And finally there is the third ascended form. The Emperor Azir, though haughty, is generous. Above all, he cares deeply for those who would march alongside him into Shuriman's golden future. As the nation rises anew, its people once again united under his rule. Now, in the canon timeline, we know that right now Azir is in the process of remaking the empire. So maybe these final steps of the finishing touches are actually scenes from the future. There is also a card for Arise, which, as we mentioned, is just Azir making an image from the sand of one of his fallen ancient soldiers. Connected to this, there are the Sand Soldiers. Azir's legions were reputed to be unstoppable even before Shuriman was reborn, but now they are truly innumerable. This confirms that these soldiers were actually real people in the past. Once again, Azir's story explained that he can use the sand to make images to view what happened in his empire in the past. But here he can also use those images of the past as warriors to fight for the future. Then there is this gorgeous art, showing us the buried sun disk. In fact, this is absolutely a scene of what happened when Azir was resurrected. When Azir beheld the Shuriman capital's sun disk, he saw it not for what it was, but what it could be, the key to returning Shurima to its former glory. So yes, this is a scene from right before he raised the sun disk from the sand. But now you may be wondering, how would he even be able to do that? None of the other Ascended have this kind of power. When the others ascended, they either just became powerful warriors, or in some of the rarer cases, like Nezuk, who was an Ascended from Ishtal, which is a nation focusing on magic, Nezuk became an Ascended mage. But even there he was using more of an arcane magic. Well, Riot did actually explain Azirs Magic, and for that we have to skip forward and have a look at the Sandcrafter. Few are taught the ways of the desert, and even fewer given the ability to command its sands as Azir can. To wield this power and know the secrets of the sands is a gift given only to Azir's most faithful and capable followers. So yeah, just like you have elementalists who can manipulate the elements of Runeterra, or stoneweavers such as Talia who can manipulate stones, there are also the Sandcrafters, which are mages who can manipulate the sands. It is possible to be born with this kind of power, although it is very rare. But the reason why there are so many Sandcrafters in Azir's army is because Azir taught them how to use this magic himself. So it is safe to assume that since he is also an Ascended, Azir is the most powerful Sandcrafter on Runeterra. That's how the Shuriman Empire was reborn. Using his sand magic, Azir ripped the sun disk from the ground, and he rose the entire empire back to its feet. This also means that all those endless armies of sand soldiers were not risen just by Azir. Those armies were risen with the help of the Sandcrafters. And the description of this card also references what we already talked about. It says to wield this power and know the secrets of the sands. I believe that this is referencing that you can use the sands to show you an image of what happened in the past. Azir himself did that. He climbed onto the dais of Ascension, and there he used the sand to not only see his family before it was annihilated by the sun disk, but also to see how Xerath betrayed him. So it is safe to assume that these Sandcrafters can do that as well. That's what the secrets of the sands are. So, now that we know that there is a new kind of magic in Shurima, let's have a look at how it affects all the other cards related to Azir. One of those is the Dune Keeper. As the Emperor commands, both the sands and I obey. Word of Azir's return has spread across the deserts, from Shurima to the world beyond. I have ensured that myself. So not only is this person a follower of Azir, he also seems to behave like a messenger. He's the one spreading the word around that Shurima has risen. But unfortunately for this sort of a messenger, it didn't end up well for him. Then there is Emperor's Dais, which also references the Sandcrafters. The Sandcrafters lifted their hands, willing the sand into the familiar shape of armored faceless soldiers, a tireless army ready to fight for their god emperor. Then there is also the spell Unworthy. The sun will shine again upon the Shuriman lands. Well, I do believe that this is referencing Azir's turrets in the game. You can see that these are just miniature versions of the sun disks, but they serve as automated constructs that defend Shurima. And then there are Waking Sands. This one has a quote from Sivir. The box might be worth something, but whatever's inside sure as sand isn't. By which I mean it's not worth opening. Speaking from experience here. Interestingly enough, this box contains a sandstone charger. Another image shaped from the sand. But here I wonder, is this an image of a Bakai? Which, for those of you who are unaware, the Bakai are the Ascended who were unworthy to be Ascended. They are basically the result of a failed ritual of ascension. But if these are not Bakai, I wonder if this is an entire new being which we have not heard about before, because you know, we have never seen a centaur on Runeterra. Even Hecarim is not one. Hecarim is just a combination of his soul combined with the soul of his horse. So I wonder if this is perhaps something similar. If it's not either of those, this could be just a Sandcrafter morphing the image of a soldier with the image of a horse. Remember, there are horses in Shurima, so this may be what this is. Unfortunately, the quotes in-game don't confirm anything, and neither does the description. They appeared out of nowhere, made up of swirling sands. Then, after they had dispatched our forces, their forms simply disappeared, melted back into the desert. In a moment, we will have a look at another card which will give us more info on these. But interestingly, I wonder what's the symbol on their belt about. This is clearly an image of a minotaur, though it could be referencing some fallen ascended god warrior. Then there is the Devoured Council. Nothing special about these. They are just the people who decided to join Azir when the Empire was reborn. I have sworn myself to Azir and to Shuriman, my home. Will you not do the same? As a nice Easter egg, among these people you may see what appears to be Nasus. But Nasus is supposed to be quite tall, so this might be just some random Vastaya. Then there is esteemed Hierophant, which is this person who's being carried to the capital. Oh, that's Padjuman, one of the elders of Nashrame. I think everyone has come to our city today, Papa. The words of an excited onlooker. Of course, Nashrame is one of the cities in the north, which had the massive library where Nasus and Renekton fought. Then we get a bunch of sandy spells, which don't really give us any more context. There is Desert's Wrath and Emperor's Divide. But then we get the Golden Ambassador, also one of the people who decided to serve Azir, although she is a much higher ranking one. She's the person they probably sent to the neighboring regions to get abducted. Our shining future lies just beneath the sands, and it is up to us to pave the way for Azir. The Golden Empire in the desert will rise again. And after her, we get the voice of the Risen. I saw her speak long ago. The older soldier smiled, and for an instant, his granddaughter could picture it. Shuriman, gold and gleaming. Proud Azir standing over the city heralded by the voice of the Risen. She stirred in us all a passion we thought long lost. So she's basically trying to tell the common folk what the Empire could be like in the future. Next up there is the Inspiring Marshal. To receive the blessing of Azir is a great honor. To give blessing in his name, an honor greater still. The blessing of Azir is of course the ability to Sandcraft, and to give a blessing in his name would be to craft his soldiers. Although it is also possible that the Marshal is just enhancing the soldiers. But finally, then there is the Sandswept Doom. As they passed through the ravine, the Sandcrafter spoke the word of magic. A gust of wind echoed through the canyon and turned to the thunder of oncoming hoofs. You see, most people thought that this person in the background would be Azir, but the description confirmed that this is just a Sandcrafter, one of Azir's followers. And the Sandcrafter used the magic to release the centaurs from the tombs. But this makes me wonder. The previous one definitely looked like an image of sand, but these look far more physical. With that said, in some of the other images, the other soldiers also look like they have physical bodies. That's just the illusion of the sand. But in this case, since these centaurs seem to be locked within the tombs, as in they were just standing inside, they don't seem to be shaped from the sand right at this moment. I wonder if these are actually Bakai. Maybe they really were locked inside, and they were just waiting for someone to open the tomb. And finally, for the last one, there is the Sandstone Chimera. A creature which either seems to be sucking the sand from the soldiers to shape itself, or it may be a creature that is creating even more soldiers. Upon Azir's return, Shuriman caught sight of ancient beasts of legend, made of sand, but no less impressive. Notice how it said beasts of legend, meaning that there is more than just this one chimera. I wonder if we ever get to see the other creatures too. I don't really have much to say on this though. It's just a really awesome image of a beast that lived during the times of the ancient Shuriman. But now, even though that is it for the cards you can see in-game, we are still not done. Because if you get Azir to level 3, your entire deck gets replaced with special cards. This is called the Emperor's deck. But unfortunately, you can't find those cards in-game. You have to go to something like the wiki to find them. So I did do just that. And so now I want to present you all the special cards. Unfortunately, they won't reveal too much more info, but they show us what the armies of Azir would look like once the Empire is fully reborn and it is ready to conquer the world. First, there is Golden Herald. Now more powerful than ever, Azir has risen his most loyal soldiers to lead his armies. you can see that because these two also have glowing eyes, just like the soldiers, these were also risen from the sand. Then there is Crumbling Sands. Those who oppose us will be reduced to dust, which just shows us Azirs Magic. Interestingly, I wonder if the image he crafted from the sand is Targon. It looks kinda similar, so it would be cool if Azir's next goal was to attack Targon, though it might be improbable. This could be just a random structure from the sand. Though, you know, the Sun Disk is kinda linked to the Targonians, and especially the Celestial Magic. Then there is Shimmering Mirage. Between the sand, the sun and the heat, it can be difficult to tell what is real and what is merely a mirage. The card shows us an image of a rider on a lion, which is actually the Eternal Gladiator. Behold, see how our champion sits astride the lion? Even the King of Beasts would yield to his power, for he is the will of Azir. Seeing that this person's eyes are also glowing, I wonder if these are also just sand images. It certainly would make sense, because to this day we have never seen a lion anywhere on Runeterra. So it would be cool if the lions of Runeterra were gone from the world, but you can still see them because Azir can craft images of them. Then there is Emperor's Prosperity. Birds found in the desert climes are all considered symbols of Azir, and Shurimans find their presence a good omen. I honestly wonder if these birds are what shaped Azir into his ascended form. You know, the Ascended gets shaped in the image of animals. There is the theory that those animals are actually one of the celestial beings, but still, I wonder if these somehow link to Azir's appearance. Then there is General's Palace. Observe our God Emperor. He knows the power of these lands better than any, and his army only grows. Shurima is risen, and it shall never fall again. Interestingly enough, Azir's generals were his ascended god warriors. For example, both Nasus and Renekton were his generals. So I wonder if this was like their main hideout. Either way, this is actually a scene from the cinematic, which makes all of this even more possible. One of Nasus's gateways led underneath this place. Remember, there they took an elevator and they rose up there. So this may actually be Nasus's home. Then there is Emperor's Guard. The Emperor's Golden Guard moves as one, a succession of regiment warriors that is as terrifying as it is impressive to behold. These gold warriors are Azir's most loyal soldiers. And interestingly enough, if you look at their helms, it reveals that the main character of the cinematic was also one of the golden warriors. We still don't really know who it is specifically, but we know that person was one of these. Then there is a card for Sandstorm, you know, the rude jokes. And finally there is the Ascendancy Call. They will serve their emperor. My generals will make sure of it. Interestingly enough, from the quotes in-game, both Nasus and Renekton, as long as they are in the same deck as Azir, are happy to serve their emperor. Of course, they get some angry quotes when they are enemies. But in general, they are both still on Azir's side. Which makes sense, Azir has never done anything to them. It's just that Nasus and Renekton just don't like each other. So I wonder if this trio of Ascended Warriors will get some special story in the future. Of course, Xerath will have something to say against them as well, but the story of Nasus and Renekton may get really interesting soon. But we will dive deeper into these in the next Shuriman video. Nasus, Renekton and all the Bakai reveal even more new cool info. So that's what I wanna have a look at next. There are also Talia's cards, which are interesting, but they don't really reveal anything new. And Sivir simply references her own bio, nothing new there. Honestly, the most interesting cards out of those quote-unquote leftovers are all the Zilean cards. Now, it is highly likely that Zilean will become a champion eventually, and that's why I don't want to cover these just now. Just know that all those Chronomancer cards have a lot of references to Icathia, but I also love the reference to Zhonya's Hourglass.